Margaret Collins had built her empire from scratch. At 52, she ran one of the most powerful consulting firms in New York, commanding boardrooms across 3 continents, and she had zero patience for mediocrity. Every morning, her black SUV pulled up at exactly 6:45 a.m., and every morning, she barely acknowledged the man behind the wheel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? His name was Daniel Reyes, quiet, steady, always on time. A single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, alone after his wife passed from cancer 2 years ago. Margaret knew none of this. To her, Daniel was simply the driver. She once snapped at him during a call, "Just drive, please." "I don't need commentary." Daniel said nothing. He just nodded and kept his eyes on the road. Her assistant, Priya, had tried once to mention that Daniel spoke multiple languages. Margaret had waved her hand dismissively. "Drivers drive, Priya, that's it." The biggest deal of Margaret's career was closing in Geneva, a $1.3 billion merger with Trident Global, a European conglomerate led by a notoriously private, Swiss-German chairman named Klaus Hartmann. Hartmann was known for walking away from deals at the last second. He distrusted Americans. He distrusted technology. And most importantly, he conducted every sensitive conversation exclusively in his native dialect, a regional Swiss-German variation barely understood even by standard German speakers, because he believed it filtered out people who were performing rather than being genuine. Margaret had flown her entire legal and translation team to Geneva, 3 certified interpreters, 2 cultural consultants, and a negotiations coach. She was prepared for everything, or so she thought. The meeting began smoothly in English. Hartmann was polite but distant. Then, halfway through the session, something shifted. One of Hartmann's advisors leaned over and whispered something to him. Hartmann's expression darkened. He responded in rapid Swiss-German dialect, something clipped and sharp. Margaret's lead interpreter froze. She leaned toward Margaret and whispered, I can't fully follow this. It's a very specific regional dialect. He's saying something about trust, but I'm losing the nuance." The room went cold. Hartmann noticed the interpreter's hesitation, and his jaw tightened. Margaret felt the deal slipping. Millions of dollars, months of work, her firm's biggest contract, all of it balanced on a moment she had not prepared for. Then her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. He had driven her to the Geneva hotel that morning and was waiting in the lobby. His message read simply, "I heard there may be a language issue. I speak Swiss-German dialect, Alsatian French, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, and Portuguese. If you need me, I am here." Margaret stared at the screen. Her first instinct was almost to dismiss it. Then she looked at Hartmann's cold expression and made the only logical decision. She stepped out briefly, called Daniel up, and introduced him to the room. Not as her driver, but as a language specialist traveling with her team. Hartmann studied Daniel carefully. Daniel looked at him calmly and then spoke. What came out of Daniel's mouth was not polished boardroom German. It was the warm, grounded dialect of Hartmann's own region. Hartmann blinked. Then, for the first time that day, something in his face softened. He responded. Daniel answered. Back and forth they went, a quiet, genuine exchange that Margaret's interpreter later said she could only partially follow. After several minutes, Daniel turned to Margaret and translated. He says he has spent 30 years watching Americans perform respect without feeling it. He says you are the first team that brought someone who actually speaks his world. He wants to move forward. The room exhaled. The deal was signed 3 hours later. On the ride back to the hotel, Margaret sat in silence for a long time. Then she asked quietly, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. "You never asked, ma'am." She looked out the window. "Where did you learn all of this?" "My father was a diplomat. I grew up across 4 countries. Then life took a different turn." He paused. "I drive because the hours let me be home when Sophia gets out of school." Margaret felt something crack open in her chest. She had spent years building a firm on the principle of seeing potential in overlooked assets, and every single morning, she had driven past the most remarkable person in her orbit without a second glance. She promoted Daniel to head of international client relations the following month. He still picked Sophia up from school every day at 3 p.m. Some things, he made clear, were non-negotiable, and Margaret for once did not argue. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness True Stories, where every story reminds us that greatness often sits quietly, waiting to be seen.